Hi counselors, welcome to another video from Counselor Tips. In this video, we are going to be talking about Section F of the ACA Code of Ethics that specifically covers counselor supervision and client welfare. I am not going to insult your intelligence by reading the Code of Ethics to you, but I am going to point out some key highlights that you need to pay attention to whether you're supervising or you're a supervisee. So hang in there as we cover a lot of information in this video to make sure that you are being ethically compliant, again, as a supervisor or a supervisee. In F1A of the ACA Code of Ethics, it's speaking directly to client welfare. In this section, you're going to want to make sure that you pay attention to the fact that your supervisor, or you as a supervisor, is supposed to be meeting with your supervisee on a regular basis, and that supervisors and supervisees are both responsible for understanding and following the Code of Ethics. In F1B, the highlight is that supervisees are reporting their expertise or credentials accurately. That means if you haven't earned a degree in counseling yet, you do not call yourself a counselor, but you would call yourself a counselor in training. If you have any certifications, you would report those accurately. In F1C, this section highlights that supervisors are making sure that supervisees understand the level of client care necessary to protect clients' confidentiality and understand the client's rights. In Section F2, this is speaking directly to supervisors. In F2A, this section is specifically covering that those that are going to supervise interns or provisionally licensed counselors, that they have the adequate training necessary to provide supervision. This section also covers that supervisors will have some kind of training in models and techniques of supervision. Supervisors are also required to receive continuing education specifically related to supervision. Section F2B is talking about multiculturalism as well as diversity in supervision. It's important that even if you look similar to your supervisee, that you as a supervisor are exploring any differences that could appear between you and the supervisee. So even if you're the same gender, same age, and are raised and have lived in a similar area as the supervisee, there are still going to be nuances and differences, and it is your job as a supervisor to bring these up and talk to the supervisee about the differences and how it can enhance or complicate supervision. F2C is about online supervision. Now also you're going to have to check with your state laws. Remember, law always trumps ethics. So if your state law does not allow for online supervision, then you're not going to conduct it. But if your state law does allow for supervision, follow those legal guidelines set before you. One of the things to highlight in this area is that supervisors are competent in the use of technology so that supervision is most effective. They are also ensuring confidentiality of client information that is discussed via the means of using technology for supervision. F3 covers the supervisory relationship. Yes, even though it's not an intimate partnership, when you're partnering with someone to work towards a common goal, it is a relationship. F3A specifically talks about the extension of the supervisory relationship. It is a supervisor's job to make sure that personal and professional boundaries are respected, and that if there is an extension of the relationship in some kind of way, that it's to benefit the supervisee and not used by the supervisor to exploit that relationship. F3B. This is the prohibition of sexual relationships between a supervisor and supervisee. I'm not certain why we even have to discuss this topic. Please do not have sex with your supervisees, your supervisors, clients, or former clients. I think that's enough said. F3C specifically speaks to sexual harassment. Do not make jokes, as funny as they may sound, about somebody's sexual identity, their gender identity, anything that can make a supervisee uncomfortable or your supervisor uncomfortable. It's not appropriate for a professional relationship to make jokes that could compromise the relationship or other people's feelings of security. In addition, I think it goes without saying, but I will mention it, please do not hit on your supervisor or supervisee or clients. Please do not touch them in inappropriate ways, and do not make suggestions that could be misunderstood. F3D. This is speaking directly to supervisors not supervising friends or family members. You may be a very competent counselor and supervisor, but if you cannot remain objective, which usually occurs with family members and friends, then don't enter into a professional relationship with these folks. Refer them to someone that you trust. F4 talks about the supervisor's responsibilities. F4A specifically speaks to informed consent for supervision. Traditionally, I like to have my supervisees design the informed consent, and then when they submit it to me, I will edit it to mark out areas that maybe are not considered part of supervision and include areas that have not been potentially considered. Then we review the informed consent together, agreeing on the areas that have been eliminated or added, and discuss the reasons that things have been eliminated or added, so there is clear communication between the supervisor and supervisee. I like to have the supervisee design the informed consent because it is practice for them to enter into a working contract. It gets them thinking critically as to what is supervision really about for them. In the informed consent, you're going to want to make sure that the supervisor's expectations are spelled out as well as the supervisees. F4B. This section is talking about how to handle a crisis in the absence of a supervisor. So for myself, I'm available remotely because the state I'm in allows for remote supervision. So if I am out of town, on vacation, or somewhere else at a training or something like that, then I let my supervisees know that I am going to be gone for the week that I will be, and then I offer options if there is a crisis on how to contact me. In addition, if something happens to me, such as a grave illness, I become disabled, or I pass away, I already have had a discussion with another supervisor who is eligible to supervise my supervisees, that if something were to happen, that they would take up my supervisees in my absence and then help them find an appropriate supervisor. F4C, this is really about the standards of practice. In this section, supervisors are making sure supervisees are following the state law as well as the ACA Code of Ethics. Some states also have their Code of Ethics. In the state that I'm in, it very much mimics the ACA Code of Ethics, so I always refer my supervisees directly back to the ACA Code of Ethics. F4D. This is about the termination of the supervisory relationship. This section gives supervisors the right to be empowered to terminate supervision with enough notice, as well as addresses the need for working out any kind of difficulties or misunderstandings. I had a supervisee at one time who was not making payments for supervision in a timely fashion. I let them know that if they could not make payments in a timely fashion, including the month they were behind for, that they would need to find another supervisor within 1 month, that I would still supervise them for the coming month, but they would have to make arrangements to find someone else. The reason I gave behind this is because I'm not very good with numbers. I'm not a very good accountant. I'm a really good counselor and counselor educator and supervisor, but please don't leave it up to me to keep track of money. This is not my strength. F5 is really addressing the student and the supervisee's responsibilities. F5A specifically states that students that are counselors in training and supervisees that are provisionally licensed are obligated to follow the Code of Ethics. F5B is speaking to impairment of students or supervisees, and that supervisors are looking out for the health and well-being of their students and supervisees, making sure that they've not become impaired and could potentially harm a client. In this section, it is stating that supervisors will contact others for assistance, such as if a student becomes impaired, a supervisor will contact faculty with a faculty advisor and let them know what's going on. Supervisors have a responsibility to make sure clients and others are protected, and that if a student or supervisee does become impaired, then services will be suspended or terminated until the student or supervisee regains their health. F5C. This is about professional disclosure. And this means students or supervisees are disclosing that they are either a counselor in training or a provisionally licensed counselor, and that the limits of confidentiality may be somewhat limited because students and supervisees will be reviewing cases with their supervisors and faculty in order to make sure that they're delivering the most competent client care possible. They allow clients to choose whether to enter into a relationship where their information will be discussed in supervision. F6. This is about evaluations, remediation, and endorsement. F6A, evaluation. Basically, this area is stating that supervisors of either students or provisionally licensed counselors are going to be providing evaluation of the student or provisionally licensed counselor's performance. F6B, gatekeeping and remediation. Not everyone who enters into a counselor training program is a fit for the program or the profession. It becomes the responsibility of supervisors and faculty that are training counselors in training, as well as those that are provisionally licensed, to make sure that the student or the provisionally licensed counselor is a fit for the profession. Sometimes remediation is required. Sometimes this includes counseling. Sometimes this includes addressing a problem like addiction in treatment. Sometimes this includes some self-work or additional training. The supervisors and faculty bear a huge responsibility to make sure that those that are in training and provisional counselors are well enough to work with clients. Remember, this is not a profession like accounting where you're going to be working with numbers. You're working with people. And if you're not well, you can possibly injure somebody. F6C, counseling for supervisees. So if a supervisee discusses that they're having a difficult time in their personal or professional life, then supervisors give their best effort to help a supervisee find an appropriate counselor to help them resolve concerns or to implement remediation. F6D, endorsements. In this section, we really want to pay attention that it is an extension of gatekeeping, that supervisors will endorse trainees, that is, students or provisionally licensed counselors, when they successfully complete the requirements that are set before them. If a supervisee is not successful in completing the requirements, the supervisor is to have a conversation with the supervisee, letting them know the areas that they must continue to work on in order to meet the minimum standard required before them, either to graduate a program where they're being trained as a counselor or to apply for a full independent licensure. However, supervisors do not misuse their power and withhold endorsement if the supervisee has completed all necessary items. Thank you for joining me for this brief video that covered the ACA Code of Ethics, Section F, Counselor Supervision and Client Welfare. I hope that you found this summary to be supportive of you, whether you're supervising others or you're seeking out a supervisor for yourself. If you find this video to be helpful and you know another counselor or supervisor that could benefit from it, please consider sharing it. And if you're learning from counselor tips, please consider subscribing to this channel to continue to learn. I'll see you soon.